For thousands of years, humanity has worshipped gods who came from the sky. But what if those gods weren't divine, but extraterrestrial? The ancient Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, powerful beings who, according to their own writings, came from the stars to create humans as a servant race. Mythology, or ancient alien truth hidden in plain sight? If you've ever felt like there's something missing from humanity's origin story, you just clicked on the right video. What you're about to learn could change everything you thought you knew. Tonight, we're diving into something that's haunted human curiosity for generations. Not lost civilizations swallowed by sand, not forgotten kings whose names echo through empty halls, but something far more unsettling. We're talking about beings described in humanity's oldest written records. Beings who supposedly descended from the heavens, walked among our ancestors, and shaped the very foundations of civilization itself. The Anunnaki. If you've ever wondered whether our ancient past holds secrets that mainstream history prefers to keep buried, feel free to like this video and subscribe, but only if you're genuinely ready to question everything you thought you knew about human origins. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what you think about these ancient mysteries. It's always fascinating to see how many of us are drawn to the same unanswered questions. So settle in, maybe turn down the lights, and let's begin with clay tablets that refuse to stay silent. Deep in the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, archaeologists have uncovered thousands of these tablets. Wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay over 4,000 years ago. Most contain mundane records, trade agreements, tax collections, lists of grain and livestock. But scattered among these everyday documents are texts that tell a very different story. Stories of powerful beings who came from above, who taught humanity arts and sciences that shouldn't have existed yet, who intervened in human affairs with knowledge that seems impossible for the time. These aren't vague myths or poetic metaphors. These are detailed accounts, repeated across multiple sources, describing specific individuals with names, personalities, and roles. The Sumerians didn't treat these as fairy tales. They built their entire civilization around the reality of these beings, their laws, their agriculture, their understanding of the cosmos, all of it traced back to teachings from the Anunnaki. But here's what makes this genuinely unsettling. The more we learn about what the Sumerians actually accomplished, the harder it becomes to explain how they did it. They mapped the heavens with precision that rivals modern astronomy. They developed mathematical systems we still use today. They engineered irrigation networks that transformed deserts into fertile valleys. And they credited all of this to beings who descended from the sky. So tonight, we're not chasing conspiracy theories or wild speculation. We're examining real archaeological evidence, translated texts that exist in museums around the world, ancient achievements that continue to baffle historians. Because whether the Anunnaki were gods, advanced humans, or something else entirely, one thing is certain. The Sumerians believed they were real, and the knowledge these beings supposedly shared built the foundation of human civilization. The question isn't whether these tablets exist. They do. The question is what they really mean, and why, after all these years, we still can't fully answer that question. Let's start with the civilization that recorded these extraordinary claims. Around 5,000 years ago, in a region that would later be called the cradle of civilization, something remarkable happened. In the harsh landscape between two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, a people emerged who would change the course of human history forever. They called themselves the Sumerians. Picture this. While most of humanity was still living in small villages, struggling with basic survival, the Sumerians were building cities. Not simple settlements, but complex urban centers with tens of thousands of inhabitants. Uruk-Eridu. Names that still echo through history textbooks. These weren't just larger villages. They were something entirely new. Organized societies with specialized roles, complex hierarchies, and sophisticated infrastructure. The landscape they chose wasn't forgiving. Mesopotamia was hot, dry, and unforgiving. The rivers provided water, but they also brought devastating floods. The soil could be fertile, but only with careful management. Most people would have looked at this harsh environment and moved on. The Sumerians saw opportunity. They engineered massive irrigation systems, channeling river water across vast distances to transform barren plains into productive farmland. They built defensive walls to protect their cities. They developed drainage systems to manage flooding. They created harbors and canals for trade. All of this required not just labor, but sophisticated planning and engineering knowledge. But what truly set the Sumerians apart wasn't their engineering, it was their innovation. Around 3200 BC, they developed something that would change human history forever: writing. Not simple picture symbols, but a complex system called cuneiform. Wedge-shaped marks pressed into soft clay that could record not just objects and numbers, but abstract concepts, stories, and laws. Suddenly, human knowledge didn't have to die with each generation. It could be preserved, shared, and built upon. The implications were staggering. For the first time in human history, complex ideas could be transmitted across time and space without distortion. Legal codes could be standardized. Religious beliefs could be recorded exactly. Scientific observations could accumulate over generations. And what did the Sumerians choose to record with this revolutionary new technology? Trade records, yes. Legal documents, certainly. But also something else. Detailed accounts of beings they called the Anunnaki, those who came from heaven to earth. These weren't casual mentions or brief references. The Anunnaki appear throughout Sumerian literature as central figures in human development. They're described as powerful beings who possess knowledge far beyond normal human understanding. Knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, engineering, agriculture, and governance. Knowledge that, according to the tablets, they shared with humanity. The Sumerians didn't just claim to have learned from the Anunnaki. They provided specifics, names, relationships, individual personalities. Anu, described as the father of the gods, ruler of heaven. Enlil, controller of earth and air, often stern and demanding. Enki, god of water and wisdom, portrayed as humanity's protector and teacher. These weren't distant, abstract deities. The tablets described them as beings who walked among humans, who made decisions that affected entire civilizations, who could be pleased or angered by human actions. They had complex relationships with each other and with humanity. They made plans, changed their minds, and sometimes disagreed about how to handle human affairs. But here's what makes this story even more intriguing. The knowledge the Sumerians attributed to these beings wasn't primitive or superstitious. It was remarkably advanced. Their mathematical system, based on the number 60, was so sophisticated that we still use it today for measuring time and angles. Their astronomical observations were so accurate that modern computers confirm their calculations. They knew the Earth was round when most cultures thought it was flat. They understood planetary movements when other civilizations saw only wandering stars. They tracked lunar cycles with precision that enabled them to create calendars, still used in modified forms today. They even described celestial bodies that weren't officially discovered until the invention of telescopes thousands of years later. This creates a fascinating puzzle. Either the Sumerians were extraordinarily gifted observers who developed this knowledge entirely on their own, or they had access to information from another source. The tablets themselves suggest the latter. They consistently credit their advanced knowledge to teachings from the Anunnaki. Now, mainstream historians typically interpret these accounts as mythological. They argue that ancient peoples often attributed their achievements to divine intervention because they didn't understand the gradual process of cultural development. The Anunnaki, in this view, were symbolic representations of natural forces or abstract concepts, not actual beings. But this interpretation faces some challenges. The descriptions in the tablets are remarkably consistent across different cities and time periods. They include specific details about technology, governance, and scientific principles that suggest more than just symbolic storytelling. And the achievements they describe match archaeological evidence with surprising accuracy. Consider their irrigation systems. Modern engineers who study Sumerian canal networks are amazed by their sophistication. These weren't simple ditches, but complex hydraulic systems with locks, reservoirs, and distribution networks that required advanced understanding of water flow, soil composition, and engineering principles. The tablets credit this knowledge to Enki, who taught humans how to manage water and make the desert bloom, or consider their architecture. Sumerian ziggurats weren't just large piles of brick. They were precisely engineered structures that have survived for thousands of years. The mathematics required for their construction, the understanding of load distribution and foundation engineering, the coordination of massive construction projects. All of this suggests knowledge far beyond what we'd expect from a newly civilized people. The Sumerians themselves seemed aware of how remarkable their achievements were. Their records don't present their civilization as a gradual development from simpler cultures. Instead, they describe it as emerging suddenly, fully formed, with advanced knowledge provided by the Anunnaki. This matches the archaeological record, which shows Sumerian civilization appearing rather abruptly in the historical timeline. So, we're left with a mystery. The Sumerians developed the world's first urban civilization, complete with writing, complex mathematics, advanced astronomy, and sophisticated engineering. They credited these achievements to beings who came from heaven and shared knowledge with humanity. And their accounts of this interaction are detailed, consistent, and surprisingly accurate in their technical descriptions. Were the Anunnaki real beings who influenced human development? Were they symbolic representations of natural forces or cultural memories? Were they advanced humans from elsewhere who seemed godlike to early civilizations? Or is there another explanation we haven't considered? The answer isn't simple, but one thing is clear. The Sumerians believed these beings were real. They built their entire civilization around this belief. And the knowledge they attributed to the Anunnaki helped create the foundation of human civilization itself. As we dig deeper into this mystery, we'll explore what the tablets actually say about these enigmatic beings, their names, their roles, their interactions with humanity. Because understanding who the Anunnaki were supposed to be is the first step toward understanding what they might actually have been. The word Anunnaki itself provides our first clue. In Sumerian, it literally means those who from heaven came to earth. Not a poetic description or symbolic title, but a straightforward statement of origin. These beings, according to the ancient texts, had a specific place they came from, and it wasn't somewhere on Earth. The tablets describe the Anunnaki as numerous, organized, and hierarchical. They weren't a single entity or even a small group, but what appears to be an entire civilization with its own internal structure. At the top of this hierarchy stood Anu, described as the king of the Anunnaki, ruler of the heavenly realm. Below him were his sons and their descendants, each with specific roles and responsibilities. Enlil, Anu's eldest son, controlled the Earth's atmosphere and weather. The tablets describe him as powerful, but often harsh in his dealings with humanity. He's credited with decisions that affected entire civilizations, including the Great Flood that nearly destroyed humanity. His character in these ancient texts is complex, sometimes protective, sometimes punitive, always commanding respect and often fear. Enki, another of Anu's sons, presents a contrasting personality. Where Enlil was stern, Enki was compassionate. Where Enlil sometimes sought to limit humanity, Enki worked to help humans develop and thrive. The tablets credit Enki with teaching humans agriculture, craftsmanship, healing, and the management of water resources. He's portrayed as humanity's greatest advocate among the Anunnaki. But these weren't the only significant figures. The tablets mention dozens of Anunnaki by name, each with specific roles and personalities. Ninlil, Enlil's consort, Ninhursag, described as a creator of humans. Marduk, Enki's son, who would later become prominent in Babylonian texts. Inanna, associated with love and war. The list goes on, creating a complex pantheon of interconnected beings. What's remarkable about these descriptions is their consistency. Across different cities, different time periods, and different scribes, the Anunnaki are portrayed with the same basic characteristics and relationships. This suggests either a highly organized religious system that maintains strict doctrinal consistency, or accounts based on shared experiences with actual beings. The tablets also describe where these beings lived and how they interacted with humans. They maintained residences both in the heavenly realm and on Earth. Their earthly dwellings were often associated with temple complexes, massive ziggurats that served as bridges between heaven and earth. These weren't just symbolic structures, but functional buildings where the Anunnaki were said to actually reside when present among humans. The nature of their interactions with humanity varied depending on the individual Anunnaki and the circumstances. Sometimes they appeared in person to deliver instructions or judgments. Sometimes they communicated through dreams or visions. Sometimes they worked through human intermediaries, priests and kings who served as their representatives on Earth. But perhaps most intriguingly, the tablets describe the Anunnaki as teachers. Not distant gods who demanded worship, but active instructors who shared practical knowledge. The techniques of agriculture, the principles of mathematics and astronomy, the arts of metallurgy and construction, the foundations of law and governance. All of this, according to Sumerian records, was taught to humanity by the Anunnaki. This teaching relationship is described in remarkable detail. Specific techniques are attributed to specific Anunnaki. Enki teaching irrigation and water management. Ninlil teaching the cultivation of grains. Various Anunnaki sharing knowledge of metalworking, pottery, textile production, and other crafts that formed the backbone of Sumerian civilization. The tablets even describe conflicts among the Anunnaki about how much knowledge to share with humans. Some, like Enki, favored helping humanity develop. Others, like Enlil, worried that too much knowledge would make humans difficult to control. These weren't abstract theological debates, but practical disagreements about policy affecting human development. This creates a fascinating picture. If we take the tablets at face value, the Anunnaki weren't worshipped as distant, unknowable gods. They were respected as powerful teachers and administrators who took an active role in human affairs. They had their own agendas, their own disagreements, and their own reasons for interacting with humanity. But this raises obvious questions. If the Anunnaki were real beings, where did they come from? The tablets consistently describe them as coming from heaven. But what did that mean to ancient Sumerians? Were they referring to the sky, to another planet, to another dimension, or to something else entirely? The astronomical knowledge embedded in Sumerian texts might provide clues. Their understanding of planetary movements was so sophisticated that some researchers have wondered whether their heavenly references might be more literal than symbolic. Could the Anunnaki have actually come from somewhere else in our solar system, or even beyond it? This is where the mystery deepens, because the more we examine what the Sumerians actually knew about astronomy, the more difficult it becomes to explain how they knew it. Their knowledge wasn't just advanced for their time. Some of it seems impossible without modern instruments. Which brings us to our next question. How exactly did the Sumerians develop their extraordinary understanding of the heavens? And why did they consistently credit this knowledge to beings who came from the sky? The answers we uncover might challenge everything we think we know about ancient history and about ourselves. Look up at the night sky on a clear evening. What do you see? Points of light scattered across darkness. Maybe you can identify a few constellations if you know what to look for. Perhaps you notice that some stars seem brighter than others. But for most of us, the heavens remain largely mysterious. Now imagine you're a Sumerian astronomer 5,000 years ago. No telescopes, no computers, no light pollution, but also no modern instruments to aid your observations. Just your eyes, basic measuring tools, and whatever knowledge your culture has accumulated over generations. Yet somehow, you're mapping the movements of planets with precision that won't be matched again for thousands of years. So, this is exactly what happened, and it's one of the most puzzling aspects of the entire Anunnaki mystery. The Sumerian understanding of astronomy wasn't just impressive for its time, it was impossible for its time. They tracked planetary cycles that take decades to complete. They predicted eclipses years in advance. They understood that certain bright objects in the sky weren't stars at all, but planets following their own complex paths through the heavens. Consider Venus. To most ancient peoples, Venus appeared as two different celestial objects. The bright morning star that appeared before dawn, and the evening star that shone after sunset. The Sumerians understood these were the same planet, observed at different points in its orbit. They tracked its movements with mathematical precision, recording cycles that modern computers confirm as accurate. But Venus was just the beginning. Sumerian tablets describe all the planets visible to the naked eye. Mercury, with its rapid orbit close to the Sun. Mars, with its distinctive reddish color and irregular movements. Jupiter, bright and steady in its slow journey across the sky. Saturn, dim but persistent at the edge of visibility. They knew these weren't fixed stars, but wandering objects following predictable paths. How did they figure this out? Tracking planetary movements requires generations of careful observation. You have to notice that certain stars change position relative to others. You have to record these changes over years or decades. You have to recognize patterns in movements that seem chaotic, and you have to develop mathematical systems sophisticated enough to predict future positions. The Sumerians accomplished all of this. Their mathematical system, based on the number 60, was perfectly suited for astronomical calculations. 60 divides evenly into many smaller numbers, making it ideal for the complex fractions needed to track celestial cycles. We still use this system today when we measure time in 60-second minutes and 60-minute hours, or when we divide circles into 360 degrees. But their mathematical sophistication went far beyond simple arithmetic. Tablets discovered at various Sumerian sites contained complex calculations involving square roots, cubic equations, and geometric principles that wouldn't be formally codified by other cultures for thousands of years. The famous Plimpton 322 tablet, housed in Columbia University, contains Pythagorean triples centuries before Pythagoras was born. This mathematical knowledge enabled astronomical achievements that seem almost impossible for the time period. The Sumerians created lunar calendars that accurately predicted the phases of the moon months in advance. They calculated the length of the year to within minutes of our modern measurements. They even understood the precession of the equinoxes, a subtle wobble in Earth's rotation that takes over 25,000 years to complete one full cycle. Think about what this means. Recognizing precession requires observations spanning not just decades or centuries, but thousands of years. Either the Sumerians maintained astronomical records with unprecedented consistency across countless generations, or they inherited this knowledge from an even older source. The tablets themselves suggest the latter. Sumerian astronomical texts consistently credit their knowledge to the Anunnaki. Specific techniques and calculations are attributed to specific beings. Enki teaching the movements of water and the moon. Enlil revealing the patterns of storms and seasons. Anu sharing the secrets of the highest heavens. These weren't vague poetic attributions. The tablets describe detailed teaching sessions where Anunnaki instructors shared specific technical knowledge with human students. Methods for tracking planetary positions, techniques for predicting eclipses, formulas for calculating celestial cycles. The kind of practical, detailed information that suggests actual instruction rather than mythological storytelling. Some of this knowledge seems to extend beyond what should have been possible, even with perfect eyesight and unlimited patience. Certain Sumerian texts appear to describe moons of Jupiter and rings around Saturn, celestial features invisible without telescopic aid. While these interpretations remain controversial, they raise unsettling questions about the limits of ancient observation. Even more puzzling are references to what some scholars interpret as a detailed knowledge of our solar system's structure. The famous cylinder seal, VA243, housed in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, has been interpreted by some researchers as showing the Sun surrounded by 11 objects, matching the number of planets and major moons known to modern astronomy. Mainstream archaeologists dispute this interpretation, arguing that the seal depicts symbolic rather than literal astronomical imagery. But the precision of other Sumerian astronomical knowledge makes it difficult to dismiss such possibilities entirely. If they could accurately calculate planetary orbits and predict eclipses, what else might they have known? The consistency of their astronomical records across different cities and time periods suggests a unified understanding that was preserved and transmitted with remarkable accuracy. This wasn't folklore or guesswork, but systematic scientific knowledge maintained over centuries. And here's what makes this even more intriguing. The Sumerians didn't just use their astronomical knowledge for practical purposes like agriculture and navigation. They integrated it into their religious and cultural systems in ways that suggest deep philosophical understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos. Their creation myths describe the formation of the solar system in terms that bear striking resemblances to modern scientific theories. Their flood narratives include astronomical elements that correlate with actual celestial events. Their descriptions of the Anunnaki's heavenly realm incorporate specific details about planetary movements and stellar configurations. This integration of advanced astronomy with religious belief creates a unique challenge for historians. If the astronomical knowledge was purely observational, developed over generations of careful sky watching, why is it so thoroughly intertwined with accounts of beings from heaven? Why do the same tablets that contain sophisticated mathematical calculations also describe detailed interactions between humans and the Anunnaki? The conventional explanation suggests that ancient peoples naturally attributed their achievements to divine intervention because they didn't understand the gradual process of scientific development. But this explanation struggles to account for the specific technical details embedded in these religious texts. Consider the Epic of Creation, one of the most important Sumerian literary works. It describes the formation of the heavens and earth in terms that include specific astronomical references. Planetary positions, stellar configurations, and celestial mechanics are woven throughout the narrative in ways that suggest the authors understood these as literal, rather than symbolic elements. Similarly, the flood narrative found in texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh includes astronomical markers that correspond to actual celestial events. The timing of the flood, the duration of the deluge, and the signs that indicated its end all correlate with observable astronomical phenomena. This creates a fascinating puzzle. Either the Sumerians were extraordinarily sophisticated in their ability to blend accurate scientific observation with symbolic storytelling, or their religious accounts preserve memories of actual events that included advanced astronomical knowledge. The more we examine their achievements, the more difficult they become to explain through conventional means. Careful observation over generations might account for basic planetary tracking, but it doesn't explain the mathematical sophistication required for their calculations. Cultural exchange with other civilizations might explain some knowledge transfer, but it doesn't account for the consistency and accuracy of their astronomical records. This brings us back to the central mystery. The Sumerians credited their astronomical knowledge to the Anunnaki. They described these beings as coming from heaven and sharing the secrets of the cosmos with humanity. They provided specific names, detailed interactions, and technical information that matches archaeological evidence with startling accuracy. Were the Anunnaki symbolic representations of natural forces? Were they memories of encounters with more advanced human cultures? Were they something else entirely? The astronomical evidence doesn't provide clear answers, but it does suggest that the Sumerian understanding of the heavens was far more sophisticated than conventional timelines would predict. And if their astronomical knowledge was more advanced than it should have been, what does that tell us about the beings they credited with teaching it to them? The deeper we dig into Sumerian science, the stranger their story becomes. Which brings us to an even more unsettling question. If the Anunnaki really did share advanced knowledge with humanity, where did that knowledge come from? And why, after all these millennia, do we still struggle to understand how ancient peoples achieved what they achieved? The tablets are clear about one thing. The Sumerians didn't develop their civilization in isolation. They had teachers, powerful, knowledgeable beings who shared the secrets of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering that enabled human civilization to flourish. Whether those teachers were gods, advanced humans, or something else entirely, their influence shaped the foundation of everything we call civilization today. But understanding who they were requires us to look beyond the conventional boundaries of history and archaeology. It requires us to consider possibilities that challenge our assumptions about the development of human knowledge and the nature of our ancient past. The evidence is there, carved in clay and stone, preserved in tablets that have survived for thousands of years. The question isn't whether the Sumerians believed in the Anunnaki. They clearly did. The question is what that belief was based on, and what it might tell us about forgotten chapters in the story of human development. As we continue exploring this mystery, we'll examine the specific claims made in these ancient texts. The detailed descriptions of Anunnaki technology, their interactions with human leaders, and their influence on the development of civilization itself. Because understanding what the tablets actually say is the first step toward understanding what they might actually mean. And what they might mean could change everything we thought we knew about our origins, our capabilities, and our place in the universe. The Anunnaki mystery isn't just about ancient history. It's about the fundamental question of who we are and how we became who we are. The answers, if they exist, are written in languages most of us can't read, preserved on tablets most of us will never see, describing events most of us have never heard of. But those answers might hold the key to understanding not just our past, but our future as well. The implications of what we've discovered so far are staggering, but they pale in comparison to what the tablets reveal about the Anunnaki's direct involvement in human affairs. Because according to these ancient records, these beings didn't just observe human development from a distance. They actively participated in it. They made decisions that affected entire civilizations. They chose human leaders, guided the development of cities, and even intervened in conflicts between nations. This isn't speculation or interpretation. It's explicitly described in tablets found across multiple Sumerian sites. The Anunnaki Assembly, a council of these beings, is portrayed as making policy decisions about humanity's future. They debated whether humans should be allowed to multiply freely or kept in smaller numbers. They argued about how much knowledge to share and how much to withhold. They even disagreed about whether humanity should survive at all. The most famous of these debates concerns the Great Flood. According to the tablets, Enlil became frustrated with humanity's noise and apparent disobedience. He convinced the assembly to send a catastrophic flood to wipe out human civilization entirely. But Enki disagreed with this decision. Working in secret, he warned a human named Utnapishtim about the coming disaster and instructed him to build a massive boat to preserve human and animal life. This story should sound familiar. It's nearly identical to the biblical account of Noah and the flood, which was written centuries later. But the Sumerian version includes details absent from later retellings, specific dimensions for the ark, precise instructions for waterproofing, technical specifications that suggest real engineering knowledge rather than symbolic storytelling. More importantly, the Sumerian flood narrative places this event within a larger framework of Anunnaki politics and decision-making. It wasn't a divine judgment based on human morality, but a practical decision made by beings who saw humans as becoming too numerous or too independent. The flood was a reset button, a way to start over with a smaller, more manageable human population. Archaeological evidence supports the existence of massive flooding in ancient Mesopotamia. Geological surveys have identified flood layers in the soil that correspond roughly to the time frame described in the tablets. Whether these floods were natural disasters or something else remains unclear, but they definitely occurred. What makes this even more intriguing is how the tablets describe the aftermath of the flood. Rather than abandoning humanity entirely, the Anunnaki decided to rebuild civilization with the survivors. But this time, they implemented what appears to be a more systematic approach to human development. They established kingship as an institution, choosing specific humans to serve as intermediaries between the Anunnaki and the general population. These weren't just political leaders, but individuals who claimed direct communication with the Anunnaki and authority derived from them. The Sumerian king list, a document that chronicles early rulers, explicitly states that kingship was lowered from heaven after the flood. This creates a fascinating pattern. The tablets describe a cycle where the Anunnaki would establish human civilizations, guide their development for a time, then withdraw or intervene when those civilizations became too independent or troublesome. It's almost as if humanity was being managed rather than simply observed. The evidence for this management extends beyond political structures. Sumerian cities weren't built randomly or according to purely practical considerations. They were designed according to specific patterns that appear to reflect Anunnaki preferences and requirements. Temple complexes were positioned at precise locations. City layouts followed geometric principles that required advanced mathematical knowledge. Even the orientation of major buildings seems to have been calculated according to astronomical alignments. Take the ziggurat at Ur, one of the best preserved examples of Sumerian architecture. This wasn't just a large building, but a precisely engineered structure with complex internal chambers, drainage systems, and astronomical alignments. The mathematics required for its construction, the coordination needed for its building, and the resources invested in its completion all suggest centralized planning and direction. But here's what's truly puzzling. The tablets describe these ziggurats not as monuments to the gods, but as actual residences for the Anunnaki, functional buildings where these beings lived when present on Earth. The internal chambers weren't symbolic spaces, but practical rooms designed for occupation. The elaborate drainage systems weren't ceremonial features, but functional infrastructure for actual habitation. This interpretation is supported by the detailed maintenance records found at various temple sites. These weren't just religious texts, but practical documents describing the care and feeding of the Anunnaki, specific foods that had to be prepared, particular rituals that had to be performed, daily schedules that had to be maintained, the kind of detailed instructions you'd expect for caring for actual residents rather than symbolic deities. Even more intriguing are the technological descriptions embedded in these maintenance records. References to objects and processes that don't match anything else from the ancient world. Devices that produce light without fire, mechanisms that moved without visible power sources, materials that seem to possess properties beyond normal human understanding. Some researchers have interpreted these descriptions as evidence of advanced technology possessed by the Anunnaki. Others argue they're simply poetic descriptions of natural phenomena or symbolic representations of divine power. But the consistency and specificity of these accounts make them difficult to dismiss entirely. The tablets also describe the Anunnaki as possessing extended lifespans far beyond normal human experience. Individual Anunnaki are said to have lived for thousands of years, maintaining active roles in human affairs across multiple generations. This longevity supposedly enabled them to guide human development over extended periods, implementing long-term plans that individual humans couldn't complete within their shorter lifespans. This creates another puzzle for historians. If the Anunnaki were purely mythological figures, why were they described with such specific lifespans and detailed chronologies? The tablets don't present them as timeless, eternal beings, but as long-lived individuals with measurable ages and documented histories. The Sumerian king list provides even more specific information about Anunnaki-human interactions. It describes periods when individual Anunnaki ruled directly over human cities, followed by periods when they governed through human intermediaries. The transitions between these different forms of government are documented with precise dates and specific circumstances. What emerges from these records is a picture of systematic, long-term involvement in human development. Not random interventions or symbolic relationships, but organized management of human civilization by beings with their own agendas and objectives. The Anunnaki appear to have had specific goals for humanity and specific methods for achieving those goals. But this raises uncomfortable questions about human autonomy and development. If the tablets are accurate, did human civilization develop naturally through human ingenuity and effort? Or was it guided, shaped, and controlled by external forces with their own purposes? The archaeological evidence doesn't provide clear answers, but it does suggest that Sumerian civilization emerged more quickly and more fully developed than conventional timelines would predict. The transition from simple agricultural communities to complex urban civilizations happened remarkably fast in Mesopotamia. Within a few centuries, the Sumerians went from basic farming to sophisticated cities with advanced technology and complex social structures. This rapid development might be explained by favorable environmental conditions, cultural exchange with other regions, or exceptional human innovation. But it might also reflect external guidance and assistance of the kind described in the tablets. The Anunnaki accounts provide a potential explanation for why Sumerian civilization advanced so quickly and achieved so much in such a short time. The consistency of these accounts across different cities and time periods suggests they weren't just local myths or individual fantasies. The same basic story appears in texts from Uruk, Babylon, and other Mesopotamian cities. The same names, the same relationships, the same basic chronology of events. Either there was remarkable coordination in maintaining mythological consistency, or these accounts were based on shared experiences with actual beings. Modern scholars tend to favor the first explanation, arguing that religious systems naturally develop consistent mythologies through cultural transmission and institutional control. But this explanation struggles to account for the technical accuracy and specific details embedded in these mythological accounts. The engineering specifications in the flood narrative, the astronomical calculations in creation myths, the mathematical principles underlying temple construction, the agricultural techniques attributed to specific Anunnaki. These aren't the kind of details you'd expect in purely symbolic stories, but they're exactly what you'd expect in accounts based on actual instruction and guidance. This creates a fundamental challenge for conventional interpretations of ancient history. Either the Sumerians were far more sophisticated than we've assumed, developing advanced knowledge entirely through their own efforts, while attributing it to mythological beings for cultural or psychological reasons, or their accounts preserve memories of actual interactions with beings who possessed knowledge beyond normal human capabilities. Neither explanation is entirely satisfactory. The first requires us to believe that early humans achieved remarkable sophistication while simultaneously creating elaborate mythologies to deny their own achievements. The second requires us to accept the existence of beings whose nature and origins remain completely mysterious. But there's a third possibility that historians rarely consider. Maybe the truth lies somewhere between mythology and literal interpretation. Maybe the Anunnaki were real beings, but not necessarily supernatural ones. Maybe they were advanced humans from elsewhere, or representatives of a lost civilization, or even time travelers from our own future. Maybe the tablets preserve distorted memories of actual encounters with beings who seemed godlike to ancient peoples, but were actually something more understandable. This possibility becomes more intriguing when we consider how often human history has been shaped by encounters between cultures at different levels of technological development. When Europeans first arrived in the Americas, many indigenous peoples initially perceived them as gods or supernatural beings because of their unfamiliar technology and appearance. Similar reactions occurred during early contact with isolated cultures throughout human history. Could something similar have happened in ancient Mesopotamia? Could the Anunnaki have been advanced humans whose technology and knowledge seemed supernatural to early civilizations? Could their descent from heaven have been a primitive description of arrival from distant lands, or even from aircraft of some kind? This interpretation would explain many of the puzzling aspects of the Anunnaki accounts, while avoiding the need to invoke supernatural explanations. It would account for their advanced knowledge, their technological capabilities, and their systematic involvement in human development. It would also explain why their influence gradually diminished over time, as the knowledge and technology they shared became integrated into human civilization. But even this more grounded interpretation raises profound questions about human history and development. If advanced beings, whether supernatural or merely technologically superior, played such a central role in establishing human civilization, what does that tell us about our own capabilities and achievements? How much of what we consider uniquely human was actually taught to us by others? And if such intervention occurred once, could it happen again? Are there aspects of human development that we still don't understand? Forces still shaping our evolution and progress in ways we haven't recognized? The Anunnaki mystery isn't just about ancient history. It's about the fundamental nature of human development and our place in the larger cosmos. Whether these beings were gods, advanced humans, or something else entirely, their influence on early civilization appears to have been profound and lasting. The tablets that preserve their story continue to challenge our assumptions about the past and force us to consider possibilities we might prefer to ignore. Because sometimes the most unsettling questions are the ones that suggest we might not know as much about ourselves as we think we do. As we delve deeper into this mystery, we'll examine the specific technologies and knowledge the Anunnaki supposedly shared with humanity, the detailed descriptions of their capabilities and methods, the evidence for their continued influence on human development long after their direct presence supposedly ended. Because understanding what the Anunnaki taught might be the key to understanding who they were and who we became because of them. The technologies described in these ancient tablets read like science fiction, yet they're carved in clay that predates our earliest known civilizations by thousands of years. We're not talking about vague references to divine power or poetic descriptions of natural phenomena. These are specific, detailed accounts of devices and processes that shouldn't have existed in the ancient world. Consider the descriptions of what the tablets call the ME, objects of power that the Anunnaki supposedly used to govern both natural forces and human societies. These weren't symbolic crowns or ceremonial scepters, but functional devices with specific capabilities. The tablets describe them as containing the fundamental principles that governed everything, from agriculture and craftsmanship to warfare and leadership. Inanna, one of the prominent Anunnaki figures, is said to have stolen these ME from Enki and used them to advance human civilization. But here's what makes this story genuinely unsettling. The tablets don't describe these as abstract concepts or spiritual principles. They describe them as physical objects that could be held, transported, and activated. Objects that somehow contained and transmitted complex knowledge. Think about what this might mean. Thousands of years before humans developed writing systems sophisticated enough to preserve complex information, the tablets describe devices that could store and transfer knowledge directly. Sound familiar? We have similar technology today. We call them computers, hard drives, and data storage devices. But according to these ancient texts, such technology existed in the hands of the Anunnaki millennia before humans supposedly invented it. The descriptions become even more intriguing when we examine accounts of Anunnaki transportation. The tablets consistently describe these beings as traveling between heaven and earth, but they provide specific details about how this travel occurred. References to sky boats and chariots of the gods that could move through the air without visible means of propulsion. The prophet Ezekiel's vision, recorded centuries later, describes encountering beings who arrived in what he could only describe as wheels within wheels, with eyes all around, accompanied by noise like rushing water. His description, while poetic, includes specific technical details about the craft's appearance, movement, and capabilities, details that match remarkably well with modern eyewitness accounts of unidentified aerial phenomena. But perhaps most fascinating are the tablets' descriptions of Anunnaki genetic manipulation. The Sumerian creation myth doesn't describe humans being formed from clay in some mystical process. It describes a systematic biological procedure where the Anunnaki combined their own genetic material with that of existing earthly creatures to create a new hybrid species, modern humans. The text known as the Atrahasis epic provides specific details about this process. It describes Enki and the goddess Ninmah working together in what sounds remarkably like a laboratory setting, mixing biological materials, conducting experiments, and refining their techniques over multiple attempts. The language is technical, precise, and consistent with modern understanding of genetic engineering principles. Even more intriguing, the tablets describe the creation of humans as serving a specific purpose, not as beloved children of the gods, but as workers designed to perform tasks the Anunnaki found tedious or difficult. The term used in Sumerian translates roughly to primitive worker, beings created to serve a function rather than for their own sake. This creates an uncomfortable parallel with modern biotechnology. Today, we routinely create genetically modified organisms designed to serve human purposes. We engineer bacteria to produce medicines, modify crops to resist pests, and experiment with creating organisms that can perform specific tasks. The idea of advanced beings using similar techniques to create a workforce isn't as far-fetched as it might initially seem. The tablets also describe conflicts among the Anunnaki about this genetic manipulation. Some, led by Enki, argued for treating humans with care and gradually sharing more knowledge with them. Others, led by Enlil, worried that humans were becoming too independent and might eventually challenge Anunnaki authority. These weren't theological debates about divine will, but practical discussions about managing a created species. Archaeological evidence provides some intriguing correlations with these accounts. The sudden appearance of anatomically modern humans in the fossil record has long puzzled anthropologists. The rapid development of human intelligence, language, and tool use doesn't follow the gradual evolutionary pattern seen in other species. Something seems to have accelerated human development dramatically around 50,000 years ago. Geneticists have identified what they call mitochondrial Eve, a common female ancestor from whom all modern humans descended. The timeline for this ancestor's existence roughly corresponds with the Sumerian accounts of human creation. While mainstream science attributes this to natural evolutionary bottlenecks, the correlation with ancient accounts of genetic manipulation is striking. Even more puzzling are the genetic anomalies found in modern human DNA. Sequences that don't match patterns found in other primates. Genes that appear to have been inserted rather than evolved gradually. Genetic markers that suggest our species underwent rapid changes that conventional evolution struggles to explain. The tablets describe the Anunnaki as possessing extended lifespans measured in thousands rather than decades. But they also describe a gradual decline in these lifespans over time, both for the Anunnaki themselves and for their human offspring. Early human rulers mentioned in the king list are said to have lived for centuries, with lifespans gradually decreasing over generations until they reached normal human ranges. This pattern matches genetic research, suggesting that human aging is controlled by specific genetic switches that could theoretically be modified. The idea that humans once lived much longer isn't just found in Sumerian texts, but appears in multiple ancient traditions worldwide. Biblical patriarchs, mythological heroes, and legendary kings from various cultures are all described as living for centuries before lifespans mysteriously shortened. Modern research into aging has identified specific genes that control cellular regeneration and death. Scientists have successfully extended lifespans in laboratory animals by modifying these genes. The possibility that human lifespans could be dramatically extended through genetic manipulation is no longer science fiction, but an active area of research. The tablets also describe advanced medical knowledge possessed by the Anunnaki. Detailed surgical procedures, sophisticated understanding of anatomy, and treatments that wouldn't be rediscovered by human medicine for thousands of years. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts, describes surgical techniques that seem far too advanced for the supposed level of ancient medical knowledge. But here's where the mystery deepens even further. The tablets don't just describe the Anunnaki sharing this knowledge with select humans. They describe a systematic program of education where chosen individuals were trained in various specialized skills. These humans then became the foundation for what we now call civilization, the first priests, kings, craftsmen, and scholars. The concept of divine kingship found throughout ancient cultures takes on new meaning in this context. Rulers didn't just claim divine authority for political convenience. They claimed direct genetic descent from the Anunnaki, making them literally different from ordinary humans. Archaeological evidence from royal tombs supports these claims of genetic distinction. Royal mummies often show physical characteristics that differ significantly from common people of the same time period. DNA analysis of ancient royal remains has revealed genetic markers that don't match the general population. Elongated skulls, unusual bone density, and other physical traits that suggest these individuals were genuinely genetically distinct. Whether this resulted from selective breeding, genetic manipulation, or some other factor remains unclear. The tablets describe a gradual withdrawal of direct Anunnaki involvement in human affairs. Not an abrupt abandonment, but a systematic reduction in their presence as humans became more capable of managing their own development. This withdrawal supposedly occurred over several generations, with the Anunnaki gradually reducing their direct intervention while maintaining influence through their human offspring and selected representatives. This pattern matches archaeological evidence showing the evolution of religious practices in ancient Mesopotamia. Early temples were designed as actual residences for gods who were expected to physically inhabit them. Later temples became more symbolic, designed for worship rather than habitation. The transition suggests a change from expecting direct divine presence to maintaining connection with absent deities. But the tablets suggest this withdrawal wasn't permanent. They describe periodic returns of the Anunnaki to check on human progress, intervene in major crises, or make course corrections in human development. These interventions supposedly became less frequent over time, but never stopped entirely. This creates a fascinating possibility. If the Anunnaki were real beings who once guided human development, could they still be monitoring our progress? Could the rapid technological advancement of the past century represent another period of intervention or guidance? Could phenomena we don't understand, unexplained aerial sightings, sudden leaps in scientific knowledge, technological breakthroughs that seem almost too convenient, reflect continued influence from sources we haven't recognized. The tablets suggest that human civilization wasn't meant to develop in isolation. We were designed as a managed species, guided and directed by beings with their own agenda for our development. This guidance supposedly included built-in limitations, genetic, psychological, and technological constraints that would prevent us from becoming a threat to our creators, while still enabling us to serve our intended purpose. But they also describe humans as possessing hidden potential that could be activated under the right circumstances. The tablets mention dormant capabilities within human genetics that could enable abilities far beyond our current limitations. Enhanced intelligence, extended lifespans, even psychic or telepathic capabilities that might seem supernatural but are actually latent genetic traits. Modern research into human potential supports some of these possibilities. We know that humans use only a small fraction of their brain capacity. We've identified genetic sequences that appear to serve no current function, but might have capabilities we haven't discovered. We've documented cases of individuals displaying abilities that seem to exceed normal human limitations under extreme circumstances. The implications of all this are staggering. If the tablets are accurate, human civilization represents not our independent achievement, but the success of an ancient genetic and social engineering project. We are, in essence, a created species designed to serve purposes we may not fully understand. But this also suggests possibilities for human development that we've barely begun to explore. If we were designed with hidden capabilities, if our genetic potential extends far beyond our current limitations, if we possess dormant traits that could transform our species, then our future might be far more extraordinary than we've imagined. The tablets describe the eventual return of the Anunnaki, not as conquerors or destroyers, but as teachers returning to guide their creation through the next phase of development. They supposedly left behind specific signs and markers that would indicate when this return was approaching. Technological achievements, social developments, and even astronomical events that would signal the beginning of a new phase in human evolution. Some researchers argue that we're already seeing these signs. The development of genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and space travel. The emergence of global communication networks and international cooperation. Even the recent discoveries of potentially habitable planets and the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. All of these developments match descriptions found in various ancient texts about the conditions that would precede the return of humanity's original teachers. Whether any of this is literal truth, symbolic metaphor, or something in between remains an open question. But the consistency of these accounts across multiple cultures, the technical accuracy of many details, and the correlation with modern scientific discoveries make them impossible to dismiss entirely. The Anunnaki mystery forces us to confront fundamental questions about human nature, human potential, and human destiny. If we were created rather than evolved, if we were designed with specific capabilities and limitations, if we're part of a larger plan we don't fully understand, then everything we thought we knew about ourselves and our place in the universe might need to be reconsidered. But it also suggests that our story is far from over, that the abilities we've developed, the knowledge we've gained, and the technologies we've created might be preparing us for something greater, something our creators always intended, but that we had to discover and develop for ourselves. The tablets that preserve these accounts continue to challenge our assumptions and force us to consider possibilities that extend far beyond conventional history. Because sometimes the most profound truths are hidden in the stories we've learned to dismiss as myths, and sometimes those myths contain keys to understanding not just where we came from, but where we're going. As we continue exploring this mystery, we'll examine the modern implications of these ancient accounts, the ways that Anunnaki descriptions might relate to contemporary phenomena we don't yet understand. The possibility that contact with our creators never actually ended, but simply became more subtle and indirect. Because if the tablets are right, the Anunnaki story isn't ancient history. It's an ongoing saga in which we're still active participants, whether we realize it or not. What's perhaps most unsettling about these ancient accounts isn't just what they describe, but how they describe it. The tablets don't read like mythology or religious poetry. They read like technical manuals, instruction guides, historical records kept by beings who understood technology we're only beginning to rediscover. Take the descriptions of what the Sumerians called the divine weapons possessed by the Anunnaki. These weren't swords or spears, but devices that could level mountains, dry up rivers, and destroy entire cities from a distance. The language used to describe their effects matches remarkably well with modern accounts of advanced weaponry. Energy beams that could melt stone, explosions that left the ground barren for years afterward, weapons that killed without leaving visible wounds. The tablets describe Enlil using such devices to reshape landscapes, carving valleys, and redirecting waterways to suit Anunnaki purposes. Marduk supposedly possessed weapons that could create storms and earthquakes on command. These weren't metaphorical descriptions of natural disasters, but specific accounts of beings using technology to manipulate their environment in ways that seemed godlike to ancient observers. Archaeological evidence from various Middle Eastern sites shows layers of vitrification, where sand and stone have been melted and fused by intense heat. The temperatures required for such effects exceed anything achievable with ancient technology. Yet these sites correlate with locations mentioned in tablets as places where the Anunnaki demonstrated their power or fought battles among themselves. But perhaps most intriguing are the tablets' descriptions of Anunnaki communication systems. They describe devices that allowed instant communication across vast distances, enabling coordination between Anunnaki stationed in different regions or even different realms. The language used suggests technology remarkably similar to our modern communication networks, but implemented through means the ancient scribes could barely comprehend. These communication devices supposedly enabled the Anunnaki to maintain centralized control over their various projects and territories. They could coordinate responses to human uprisings, share information about successful techniques, and make collective decisions about human management. The tablets describe a sophisticated administrative system that would be impressive even by modern standards. What makes this even more fascinating is how these technological descriptions correlate with ancient sites around the world. Megalithic structures that show evidence of advanced construction techniques, stone cutting and placement that required precision beyond what we'd expect from ancient builders. Sites positioned according to mathematical principles that suggest coordinated global planning. Consider the precision of ancient stone cutting found at sites like Pumapunku in Bolivia or the Giza complex in Egypt. Blocks cut with tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. Joints so precise that modern engineers struggle to understand how they were achieved. Surface finishes that suggest tools and techniques we can't identify. The tablets describe the Anunnaki as master builders who could shape stone as easily as clay. They supposedly possessed tools that could cut through the hardest materials, move massive blocks without mechanical advantage, and create structures designed to last for millennia. Archaeological evidence suggests such capabilities actually existed, even if we can't explain how. But the technological descriptions extend beyond construction and communication. The tablets describe Anunnaki vehicles that could travel not just through the air, but through what they called the cosmic ocean, references to journeys between worlds, navigation by stellar positions, and vehicles that could function in environments hostile to human life. These descriptions become particularly intriguing when compared with modern space travel technology. The tablets describe launch procedures, orbital mechanics, and interplanetary navigation in terms that suggest genuine understanding of spaceflight principles. Either the ancient scribes possessed a remarkable imagination for concepts they'd never encountered, or they were recording observations of actual technology. The tablets also describe terraforming projects undertaken by the Anunnaki to make Earth more suitable for their purposes. Atmospheric modifications, climate manipulation, and ecosystem management on a planetary scale. These weren't gradual changes occurring over geological time, but deliberate engineering projects completed within relatively short periods. Evidence for such large-scale environmental manipulation might be found in the geological record. Sudden climate shifts that don't match natural patterns. Atmospheric changes that occurred too rapidly for normal planetary processes. Ecosystem modifications that suggest external intervention rather than natural evolution. The oxygen content of Earth's atmosphere, for instance, shows dramatic fluctuations that don't correlate with known natural processes. The distribution of certain mineral deposits suggests artificial concentration rather than natural formation. Even the positioning of Earth's moon, which is unusually large relative to our planet, and maintains a suspiciously stable orbit, has led some researchers to question whether it might be artificial rather than natural. But perhaps most disturbing are the tablets' descriptions of Anunnaki genetic laboratories. Not crude experimentation, but sophisticated facilities equipped with technology for analyzing, modifying, and combining genetic material from different species. The tablets describe these facilities as containing thousands of specimens, detailed genetic records, and equipment for conducting complex biological procedures. Modern genetic research has identified anomalies in human DNA that suggest artificial modification, gene sequences that appear to have been inserted rather than evolved naturally, regulatory mechanisms that seem designed rather than random. Even the rapid expansion of human brain capacity over the past 100,000 years doesn't follow normal evolutionary patterns. The tablets describe humans as one of many hybrid species created by the Anunnaki for different purposes. Not just workers, but specialists designed for various functions. Some optimized for physical labor, others for intellectual tasks, still others for specific environmental conditions. The genetic diversity of modern humans might reflect this ancient program of specialized breeding. Archaeological evidence supports the existence of distinct human populations with dramatically different physical characteristics in ancient times. Elongated skulls found in Peru and Egypt, gigantic skeletons discovered in North America, populations with unusual bone density, distinctive facial features, and genetic markers that don't match standard human populations. These physical variations might represent different Anunnaki genetic experiments, or different hybrid lines bred for specific purposes. The tablets suggest that modern humans represent a simplified version of these original genetic modifications, with most specialized traits gradually diluted through interbreeding over thousands of generations. But the genetic manipulations supposedly extended beyond physical characteristics. The tablets describe modifications to human consciousness, intelligence, and even spiritual capabilities. Humans were supposedly designed with built-in limitations that would prevent them from accessing their full potential without Anunnaki permission or intervention. These psychological limitations might explain some puzzling aspects of human behavior. Our tendency toward hierarchical social structures that mirror Anunnaki descriptions of divine authority. Our innate reverence for beings perceived as superior or divine. Even our persistent belief in gods and higher powers, despite lacking direct evidence for their existence. The tablets describe specific genetic switches that could be activated to unlock dormant human capabilities, enhanced intelligence, psychic abilities, extended lifespans, and even the capacity for direct communication with the Anunnaki themselves. These capabilities supposedly remain within human genetics, but require specific conditions or interventions to activate. Modern research into human potential supports some of these possibilities. We've identified genes that control aging, intelligence, and various psychological traits. We've documented cases of individuals displaying abilities that seem to exceed normal human limitations. We've even begun developing techniques for activating dormant genetic potential through various interventions. But the tablets suggest that accessing these capabilities without proper guidance could be dangerous. Humans supposedly lack the wisdom and emotional maturity to handle advanced abilities safely. Previous attempts to unlock human potential prematurely led to conflicts, abuse of power, and ultimately the need for Anunnaki intervention to restore stability. This creates a fascinating paradox. The very beings who created us as limited workers also embedded within us the potential to transcend those limitations. Either this was accidental, the result of imperfect genetic control, or it was intentional, part of a long-term plan to gradually develop human capabilities over time. The tablets suggest the latter. They describe a carefully orchestrated program of human development designed to unfold over thousands of years, each phase building on the previous one, gradually preparing humanity for greater responsibilities and capabilities. The ultimate goal supposedly being the creation of a species capable of serving as partners or assistants to the Anunnaki, rather than merely workers. This developmental program supposedly included built-in crisis points, tests designed to evaluate human progress and readiness for the next phase, wars, natural disasters, and social upheavals that would force humans to develop new capabilities or perish. The survivors of each crisis would possess traits needed for the next level of development. Looking at human history from this perspective, our progress doesn't seem random or purely natural. The timing of major breakthroughs, the sudden appearance of revolutionary technologies, the emergence of individuals with capabilities far beyond their contemporaries. All of this might reflect ongoing guidance from beings who understand the larger pattern of human development. The Industrial Revolution, the development of atomic energy, the creation of global communication networks, the mapping of human genetics. Each of these breakthroughs occurred at precisely the moment when humanity needed them to face new challenges or reach new capabilities. Either we've been extraordinarily lucky in our timing, or we've been receiving guidance we haven't recognized. The tablets describe the eventual return of the Anunnaki as teachers rather than rulers. Not to control human development, but to guide us through the transition to whatever we're supposed to become next. They supposedly left behind specific markers that would indicate when humanity was ready for this next phase of development. Some researchers argue that we're already seeing these markers. The development of artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and space travel. The emergence of global consciousness and international cooperation. Even the recent discoveries about human genetic potential and the search for extraterrestrial life. All of these developments match descriptions found in ancient texts about conditions that would precede the return of humanity's creators. Whether any of this is literally true remains an open question, but the consistency of these accounts, the technical accuracy of many details, and the correlation with modern discoveries make them impossible to dismiss entirely. The Anunnaki mystery forces us to consider possibilities that challenge our fundamental assumptions about human nature, human history, and human destiny. If we were designed rather than evolved, if our development has been guided rather than random, if we possess capabilities we haven't yet accessed, then our future might be far more extraordinary than we've imagined. But it also might be far more constrained than we'd like to believe. The tablets suggest that human free will, while real, operates within parameters established by our creators. We can make choices, but only within ranges they deemed acceptable. We can develop technologies, but only those that serve purposes they approved. We can evolve socially and culturally, but only in directions that align with their long-term plans. This creates profound questions about human autonomy and self-determination. If our choices are limited by genetic programming, if our development follows predetermined paths, if our destiny was decided by beings whose motives we don't fully understand, then what does it mean to be human? But it also suggests possibilities for transcending these limitations. The tablets describe humans who managed to break free from Anunnaki control, individuals who accessed capabilities beyond their intended design. These rogue humans supposedly became the basis for legends about heroes, demigods, and superhuman beings found in cultures worldwide. The key to accessing these enhanced capabilities supposedly lies in understanding our true nature and origin, recognizing that we are more than we appear to be, that we possess potential beyond our current limitations, that we were designed for purposes greater than we've realized. This knowledge, according to the tablets, is what the Anunnaki most feared humans discovering, because once humans understand their true nature and potential, once they recognize the artificial limitations placed upon them, once they learn to access their dormant capabilities, they would no longer need Anunnaki guidance or control. They would become truly independent beings, capable of determining their own destiny and perhaps even challenging their creators. The tablets suggest this transformation is inevitable, part of the original design despite its risks. Humanity was always meant to eventually outgrow its limitations and become something greater. The question isn't whether this will happen, but when and how it will unfold. The acceleration of human development over the past century might indicate that we're approaching this transformation point. The rapid advancement of technology, the expanding understanding of genetics and consciousness, the growing awareness of human potential, and even the renewed interest in ancient mysteries and alternative history. All of this might reflect humanity beginning to awaken to its true nature and capabilities. But awakening comes with risks. The tablets describe previous attempts at human liberation that ended in catastrophe. Civilizations that developed too quickly, accessed capabilities they couldn't handle responsibly, and ultimately destroyed themselves or required Anunnaki intervention to prevent global disaster. The challenge facing modern humanity might be learning to transcend our limitations without repeating these ancient mistakes. Developing our capabilities gradually and responsibly, maintaining wisdom and ethical development alongside technological advancement, and preparing ourselves for contact with our creators as equals rather than subjects. The Anunnaki mystery isn't just about ancient history or archaeological puzzles. It's about the fundamental questions of human identity, potential, and destiny. Whether these beings were gods, advanced humans, or something else entirely, their influence on human development appears to have been profound and lasting. The tablets that preserve their story continue to challenge our assumptions and force us to consider possibilities we might prefer to ignore. Because sometimes the most important truths are hidden in the stories we've learned to dismiss as myths. And sometimes those myths contain keys to understanding not just where we came from, but what we might become. As we continue exploring this mystery, we'll examine the evidence for ongoing Anunnaki influence in the modern world, the ways that ancient descriptions might relate to contemporary phenomena we don't fully understand, the possibility that contact with our creators never actually ended, but simply became more subtle and indirect. Because if the tablets are right, if the Anunnaki story is more than ancient mythology, then we might be living through the most significant chapter in human history. The chapter where we finally discover who we really are, what we're capable of, and what role we're meant to play in the larger cosmic story. The answers, if they exist, won't be found in textbooks or university lectures. They're written in clay tablets most of us will never see, preserved in languages most of us can't read, describing events that challenge everything we think we know about ourselves and our world. But they're also written in our genes, embedded in our consciousness, and reflected in the rapid changes transforming our civilization. The Anunnaki legacy isn't just ancient history, it's the key to understanding our present and our future. And that future might be arriving sooner than we think. The deeper we dig into the Anunnaki mystery, the more we encounter something that should make us pause. Not just the ancient accounts themselves, but the modern response to them. The curious silence from mainstream academia, the reluctance to seriously examine possibilities that fall outside established historical frameworks, the almost automatic dismissal of evidence that doesn't fit comfortable narratives about human development. Why this resistance? Why the scholarly hesitation to explore questions that could reshape our understanding of ourselves and our origins? Perhaps because the implications are more unsettling than most are willing to confront. Consider what we've already uncovered. Ancient texts describing genetic manipulation thousands of years before we understood genetics. Detailed accounts of advanced technology predating our supposed invention of such capabilities. Consistent stories across multiple cultures about beings who guided human development from the shadows. Archaeological evidence that supports these accounts in ways that conventional explanations struggle to address. Yet when researchers attempt to explore these connections seriously, they often find themselves marginalized, dismissed, or simply ignored by institutional archaeology. Not because their evidence is flawed, but because their conclusions challenge fundamental assumptions about human history and development. This creates a fascinating dynamic. The same academic institutions that pride themselves on following evidence wherever it leads become remarkably conservative when that evidence points toward conclusions that threaten established paradigms. The very people who should be most curious about these mysteries become their most cautious guardians against investigation. But perhaps this caution serves a purpose beyond mere academic conservatism. Perhaps there are aspects of the Anunnaki story that some would prefer remain buried in ancient languages and forgotten tablets. Aspects that raise uncomfortable questions about human autonomy, genetic manipulation, and ongoing influence from sources we don't recognize or acknowledge. Because if the tablets are accurate, if humanity really was created and guided by beings with their own agenda, then everything we believe about human achievement, human potential, and human destiny needs to be reconsidered. We might not be the autonomous species we imagine ourselves to be. We might be products of genetic engineering, subject to ongoing management by creators whose purposes we don't fully understand. This possibility becomes even more unsettling when we examine modern developments that seem to parallel ancient Anunnaki capabilities. Genetic engineering technologies that can modify human DNA with precision, the tablets attributed to these beings. Artificial intelligence systems that process information and make decisions beyond human comprehension. Space exploration programs that are rapidly developing capabilities for interplanetary travel. Are these developments purely human achievements, the result of our natural intellectual evolution? Or might they reflect the activation of capabilities embedded within us from the beginning? Dormant potentials awakening as we approach whatever transformation the ancient texts describe as humanity's intended destiny. The timing is certainly suggestive. The explosive acceleration of human technological development over the past century doesn't follow the gradual pattern we see throughout most of recorded history. Instead, it resembles the kind of rapid advancement the tablets describe occurring under direct Anunnaki guidance. Sudden leaps in understanding, breakthrough discoveries that seem almost too convenient, technologies that emerge just when humanity needs them to face new challenges. Take the development of atomic energy. The mathematical and physical principles involved were understood by relatively few individuals, yet the technology emerged simultaneously in multiple countries during a period of global crisis. The same pattern appears with computers, genetics, space travel, and other revolutionary technologies. Either we've been extraordinarily fortunate in our timing, or we've been receiving guidance we haven't recognized. The genetic research is particularly intriguing. Modern scientists have identified specific genes that control human aging, intelligence, and various capabilities. They've developed techniques for modifying these genes, potentially unlocking human potential in ways that match ancient descriptions of Anunnaki genetic manipulation. Yet this research often proceeds as if we're discovering these capabilities for the first time, rather than rediscovering knowledge that might have existed thousands of years ago. Even more fascinating are the genetic anomalies being discovered in human DNA. Sequences that don't match evolutionary patterns, genes that appear to have been inserted rather than developed naturally, regulatory mechanisms that seem designed rather than random. These findings correlate remarkably well with tablet descriptions of humans as genetically modified beings created for specific purposes. But the evidence extends beyond genetics and technology. Consider the psychological and social patterns that characterize human civilization. Our instinctive tendency toward hierarchical organizations, our reverence for authority figures and higher powers, our persistent belief in beings greater than ourselves, despite lacking direct evidence for their existence. These traits might reflect genetic programming designed to maintain human subservience to Anunnaki authority, yet we also display contradictory impulses: rebellion against authority, curiosity about forbidden knowledge, the drive to transcend limitations and achieve capabilities beyond our apparent design. The tablets suggest these conflicting impulses were intentionally built into human nature, creating internal tension that would drive development while maintaining ultimate control. This psychological programming might explain some puzzling aspects of human behavior that evolutionary psychology struggles to address. Why do we create gods and then rebel against them? Why do we build hierarchies and then fight to overthrow them? Why do we simultaneously seek security and crave adventure, demand conformity and celebrate individuality? Perhaps because we were designed with competing motivations that would ensure both stability and progress. Enough subservience to maintain order, enough rebellion to drive innovation, enough fear to prevent dangerous independence, enough curiosity to develop useful capabilities. A careful balance that would allow human civilization to advance while remaining within acceptable parameters. But this balance appears to be shifting. The rapid changes characterizing modern civilization suggest we might be approaching a threshold where the old programming no longer contains human development. Technologies that exceed ancient limitations, knowledge that challenges fundamental assumptions, capabilities that were supposedly reserved for our creators. The tablets describe this threshold as inevitable, part of the original design, despite its risks. Humanity was always meant to eventually outgrow its limitations, but only when ready to handle the responsibilities that come with enhanced capabilities. The question becomes whether we're approaching that readiness, or whether we're developing dangerous capabilities without the wisdom to use them responsibly. Recent developments in artificial intelligence provide a perfect example of this dilemma. We're creating systems with capabilities that exceed human intelligence in specific domains, yet we don't fully understand how these systems work or what their ultimate capabilities might be. We're essentially creating new forms of consciousness without understanding consciousness itself. This parallels tablet descriptions of Anunnaki concerns about human development. The worry that their created beings might develop capabilities beyond their control, potentially challenging their creators or making decisions that threaten larger purposes. The same dilemma now faces us as we create artificial beings whose capabilities might exceed our own. The genetic engineering revolution presents similar challenges. We're developing abilities to modify human DNA in ways that could eliminate aging, enhance intelligence, and even add entirely new capabilities to human biology. Yet we're proceeding with limited understanding of the long-term consequences, both for individuals and for the species as a whole. The tablets suggest the Anunnaki face similar choices when creating humanity. They could design us with enhanced capabilities that might eventually threaten their control, or limit our potential to ensure permanent subservience. They apparently chose a middle path, embedding potential within us while installing safeguards to prevent premature activation. But those safeguards appear to be failing. Human capabilities are expanding beyond their intended limits. Our technologies are approaching levels that were supposedly reserved for our creators. Our understanding of genetics, consciousness, and cosmic forces is beginning to match descriptions of Anunnaki knowledge found in ancient texts. This creates a fascinating possibility. Maybe the acceleration of human development over the past century represents more than natural progress. Maybe it reflects the planned activation of dormant capabilities. The next phase, in a developmental program, designed thousands of years ago. Maybe we're not just randomly evolving, but following a predetermined path toward whatever we were originally designed to become. The space exploration programs provide another intriguing parallel. Despite enormous costs and technical challenges, multiple nations are rapidly developing capabilities for interplanetary travel. The drive to explore beyond Earth seems almost compulsive, as if we're following some deep programming to expand beyond our original habitat. The tablets describe the Anunnaki as travelers between worlds, beings for whom interplanetary movement was routine rather than extraordinary. They suggest that this capability might be part of our intended inheritance, a natural development once humanity reaches sufficient technological maturity. Our current space programs might represent the awakening of this inherited drive to explore and inhabit other worlds. But space exploration also raises questions about contact with our supposed creators. If the Anunnaki were real beings who came from elsewhere in our solar system or beyond, then our expanding capabilities for space travel might eventually lead us to discover evidence of their existence, or even to encounter them directly. The recent acknowledgement by government agencies of unidentified aerial phenomena that exceed known human technological capabilities has added new dimensions to these questions. Objects displaying flight characteristics that shouldn't be possible with current technology, craft that seem to operate according to principles we don't understand, encounters that suggest intelligence behind the phenomena, but intelligence that doesn't match any known human capabilities. Could these modern sightings represent ongoing Anunnaki presence, monitoring of human development by beings who never actually left, or perhaps the return of creators checking on their creation's progress? The timing of increased sightings correlates with humanity's rapid technological advancement, suggesting possible connections between our development and their attention. The psychological impact of acknowledging non-human intelligence actively operating in our environment would be profound. It would force us to confront questions about human autonomy, planetary sovereignty, and our place in larger cosmic hierarchies. Questions that the Anunnaki tablets addressed thousands of years ago, but that modern civilization has largely avoided confronting. Yet, avoiding these questions doesn't make them disappear. The evidence continues to accumulate. The ancient accounts become more relevant rather than less. The technological capabilities we're developing match increasingly well with descriptions of Anunnaki abilities. The genetic modifications we're discovering correlate with accounts of our artificial creation. At some point, the weight of correlation becomes too significant to dismiss as coincidence. At some point, we have to seriously consider possibilities that challenge our fundamental assumptions about human nature and human history. At some point, we have to ask whether the Anunnaki story might be more than ancient mythology. Because if it is, if we really are the products of genetic engineering by beings whose agenda we don't fully understand, then everything about our current situation takes on new meaning. Our rapid technological development, our expanding capabilities, our growing awareness of our own potential. All of this might be unfolding according to plans made thousands of years ago by creators who understood human development better than we understand it ourselves. The implications extend far beyond academic questions about ancient history. They touch the core of human identity, purpose, and destiny. They force us to consider whether we're truly autonomous beings making independent choices, or whether we're following programming installed by others for purposes we haven't recognized. But they also suggest possibilities for human development that exceed our current imagination. If we were designed with capabilities we haven't yet accessed, if our potential extends far beyond our current limitations, if we're approaching a transformation that will fundamentally change what it means to be human, then our future might be far more extraordinary than we've dared to believe. The Anunnaki mystery isn't just about deciphering ancient tablets or understanding prehistoric civilizations. It's about recognizing who we really are, what we're capable of becoming, and what role we're meant to play in the larger cosmic story. The answers to these questions might determine not just our understanding of the past, but our survival and success in the future. As we stand at the threshold of capabilities that match ancient descriptions of divine power, as we develop technologies that could transform our species and our world, as we prepare to venture beyond Earth into the larger cosmos, we need to understand the deeper patterns shaping human development. We need to recognize the forces that have guided us to this point and prepare for whatever comes next. The tablets that preserve the Anunnaki story offer clues to these deeper patterns. They suggest that human development follows purposeful rather than random trajectories. They indicate that our current transformation was anticipated and planned by beings who understood cosmic cycles and species development in ways we're only beginning to grasp. Whether those beings were gods, advanced humans, or something else entirely, their influence on human civilization appears to be both profound and ongoing. The knowledge they supposedly shared became the foundation of everything we call civilization. The capabilities they embedded within us are beginning to manifest as we approach technological maturity. The transformation they supposedly planned is unfolding as we develop abilities that exceed our original limitations. Understanding this larger pattern doesn't diminish human achievement or reduce us to mere puppets of cosmic forces. Instead, it suggests that human development operates within frameworks larger than individual choice or cultural evolution. It indicates that we're part of something greater than ourselves, connected to purposes and possibilities that extend far beyond our current understanding. The Anunnaki legacy lives on in our genes, our consciousness, and our rapidly expanding capabilities. Whether we recognize it or not, we're living through the unfolding of plans made thousands of years ago by beings whose vision extended far beyond the immediate challenges facing ancient civilizations. We're approaching capabilities they knew we would eventually develop, facing choices they anticipated we would eventually confront. The question isn't whether this transformation will continue. The evidence suggests it's accelerating beyond our ability to control or redirect. The question is whether we'll recognize what's happening in time to navigate it wisely, or whether we'll stumble blindly into a future we don't understand and aren't prepared for. The tablets offer guidance for this navigation. They describe the challenges that come with enhanced capabilities, the responsibilities that accompany expanded awareness, the dangers that threaten beings who develop power without wisdom. They suggest that our creators faced similar challenges, made similar mistakes, and learned lessons they tried to embed within our development to help us avoid their errors. But ultimately, the choices are ours. We can continue dismissing these ancient accounts as primitive mythology, ignoring evidence that doesn't fit comfortable assumptions about human development. Or we can seriously examine the possibility that human civilization operates within larger patterns, guided by influences we don't fully recognize or understand. The evidence is there, carved in clay and stone, embedded in our genes, reflected in our rapidly expanding capabilities. The question is whether we're ready to confront what it might mean, whether we're prepared to consider possibilities that challenge everything we thought we knew about ourselves and our place in the universe. Because sometimes, the most important truths are hidden in the stories we've learned to dismiss. Sometimes the keys to understanding our future are preserved in accounts of our forgotten past. And sometimes the greatest mysteries aren't about what happened thousands of years ago, but about what's happening right now, all around us, as we transform into something our ancestors could barely imagine, but somehow knew we were destined to become. The Anunnaki mystery continues to unfold, not in ancient ruins or dusty tablets, but in laboratories and observatories, in genetic research and space exploration, in artificial intelligence and consciousness studies. The same questions that puzzled Sumerian scribes now challenge modern scientists. The same capabilities that seemed divine to ancient peoples are becoming routine human achievements. We're living through the culmination of a story that began thousands of years ago in the cradle of civilization. Whether we recognize it or not, we're participants in the unfolding of the Anunnaki legacy. The choices we make, the technologies we develop, the transformations we undergo, all of this might be guided by patterns established long before recorded history began. The mystery isn't just about who the Anunnaki were or where they came from. It's about who we are, where we're going, and what we're becoming. And the answers to those questions might determine not just our future, but the future of consciousness itself in this corner of the universe. The evidence we've examined so far creates an uncomfortable picture. Ancient texts describing technologies that shouldn't have existed, archaeological discoveries that don't fit conventional timelines, genetic anomalies that suggest artificial modification, astronomical knowledge that required capabilities beyond what ancient peoples supposedly possessed. But there's another layer to this mystery that researchers rarely discuss openly: the modern implications of what these tablets describe. The ways that ancient Anunnaki accounts might relate to phenomena we're witnessing today, but don't yet understand. The possibility that influence from our supposed creators never actually ended, but simply became more subtle and harder to recognize. Consider the acceleration of human technological development over the past century. Not gradual progress, but exponential leaps that seem to defy normal patterns of innovation. Within a single human lifetime, we've gone from horse-drawn carriages to space exploration, from mechanical calculators to artificial intelligence, from basic chemistry to genetic engineering. The speed of this transformation is unprecedented in recorded history. The tablets describe similar periods of rapid advancement occurring under direct Anunnaki guidance. Times when these beings would intervene to accelerate human development, sharing knowledge that would push civilization forward by centuries or millennia. Could our current technological explosion represent another such intervention? Another phase in the managed development of human capabilities? The timing is certainly suggestive. Many of the breakthrough discoveries that enabled our modern world emerged during periods of global crisis, when humanity faced challenges that required new capabilities to survive. The development of atomic energy during wartime, the creation of computer systems during the space race, the mapping of human genetics during an era of emerging biotechnology. Each advancement appeared precisely when needed, as if guided by some larger plan. Even more intriguing are the individuals behind these breakthroughs. Scientists and inventors who seem to possess intuitive understanding of principles that should have taken decades to develop. Nikola Tesla, describing technologies that wouldn't be fully understood until generations later. Albert Einstein, formulating theories that revolutionize physics based on thought experiments rather than empirical evidence. Individuals whose insights came not from gradual research, but from sudden flashes of understanding that transformed entire fields of knowledge. The tablets describe this phenomenon as well. Humans who were selected by the Anunnaki to receive advanced knowledge, becoming the conduits through which new capabilities were introduced to civilization. These chosen individuals weren't just intelligent or creative, but possessed some quality that made them suitable vessels for information beyond normal human comprehension. Modern genetic research might provide clues about what made certain individuals suitable for such roles. Recent studies have identified genetic variations that correlate with enhanced cognitive abilities, increased intuition, and even reported psychic phenomena. These variations appear in less than 1% of the population, but they're found disproportionately among individuals who've made revolutionary contributions to science, technology, and human understanding. Could these genetic markers represent remnants of the original Anunnaki modifications? Traits that were embedded within human DNA but only activate under specific conditions or in certain individuals? The tablets suggest that not all humans were created equal, that some possess capabilities others lacked, and that these differences were intentional rather than accidental. This genetic stratification might explain the persistent emergence of individuals whose abilities seem to exceed normal human limitations. Not just intellectual giants, but people who display intuitive understanding of complex systems, predictive abilities that border on prescience, and creative insights that transform entire civilizations. The kind of individuals who appear throughout history at critical moments, providing exactly the knowledge or innovation needed to move humanity forward. But the modern manifestations of this phenomenon extend beyond individual genius. Consider the emergence of global communication networks that enable instant information sharing across the planet. The development of artificial intelligence systems that can process and analyze data beyond human capabilities. The creation of biotechnology that allows direct modification of human genetics and consciousness. These technologies mirror capabilities the tablets attribute to the Anunnaki. Global communication systems that enabled coordination across vast distances, artificial intelligences that could manage complex civilizations, genetic modification techniques that could enhance or alter species according to specific designs. Either we're independently rediscovering technologies that existed thousands of years ago, or we're following developmental paths that were planned for us from the beginning. The artificial intelligence revolution provides a particularly striking parallel. The tablets describe the Anunnaki as possessing what they called tablets of wisdom, devices that contained vast amounts of knowledge and could provide answers to complex questions. These weren't just storage devices, but interactive systems that could analyze situations, predict outcomes, and provide guidance for decision-making. Modern AI systems display remarkably similar capabilities. They can process information beyond human capacity, recognize patterns we can't detect, and provide insights that seem almost intuitive. They're becoming advisors, decision-makers, and problem-solvers in ways that mirror tablet descriptions of Anunnaki guidance systems. But there's something unsettling about how rapidly these systems are developing. AI capabilities are advancing faster than our understanding of how they work. We're creating artificial minds whose decision-making processes we can't fully comprehend, whose potential capabilities we can't predict, and whose ultimate goals we can't control. It's as if we're being driven to develop these technologies, despite not fully understanding their implications. The tablets describe similar situations where humans were given technologies they weren't ready to handle responsibly. Advanced weapons that led to destructive conflicts, genetic modification techniques that created uncontrollable hybrid species, communication systems that were used to spread discord rather than coordinate cooperation. Each time, the result was catastrophe that required Anunnaki intervention to prevent complete civilization collapse. Are we approaching a similar crisis point? The same technologies that promise to solve human problems also threaten to create new ones we're not prepared to handle. Artificial intelligence that might exceed human control. Genetic engineering that could fundamentally alter our species. Global communication networks that can be used to manipulate consciousness on unprecedented scales. The tablets suggest these technologies aren't accidentally dangerous, but inherently destabilizing. They represent capabilities that require wisdom and restraint that most species don't possess when they first develop them. The Anunnaki supposedly learned this through their own mistakes, building safeguards into human development to prevent us from repeating their errors. But those safeguards appear to be failing. We're developing capabilities faster than our wisdom to use them responsibly. We're creating technologies that could transform or destroy civilization before we understand their full implications. We're approaching thresholds that the tablets describe as critically dangerous for any developing species. Yet we seem compelled to continue this development, as if driven by programming we can't override. The same curiosity that led us to discover fire now drives us to unlock the secrets of consciousness and genetics. The same ambition that built the first cities now motivates us to create artificial beings and modify our own biology. We can't seem to stop ourselves from pursuing knowledge and capabilities, even when they might threaten our survival. This compulsion might reflect the deepest level of Anunnaki programming. Not just genetic modifications that enhanced our capabilities, but psychological drives that ensure we'll continue developing regardless of risks. The tablets describe humans as being designed with insatiable curiosity and ambition, traits that would guarantee technological advancement even without external guidance. But they also describe built-in safeguards that were supposed to prevent us from developing dangerous capabilities too quickly. Psychological limitations that would create hesitation about proceeding with risky technologies. Social instincts that would promote cooperation over competition. Spiritual awareness that would provide wisdom to balance knowledge. These safeguards might be weakening as we approach technological maturity. The psychological constraints that once limited human ambition no longer contain our capabilities. The social cooperation that once prevented destructive competition is breaking down in the face of global challenges. The spiritual awareness that once provided wisdom is being replaced by purely material perspectives. This breakdown might be intentional, programmed to occur when humanity reaches a specific developmental threshold. The tablets suggest that some limitations were designed to be temporary, dissolving when humans were ready for greater independence and responsibility. But they also warn about the dangers of this transition, the possibility that species might destroy themselves when freed from their original constraints. The modern world shows signs of both possibilities. Unprecedented cooperation in addressing global challenges, but also increasing polarization and conflict. Revolutionary breakthroughs in science and technology, but also growing concerns about their misuse. Expanded awareness of human potential, but also rising anxiety about our ability to handle that potential responsibly. The tablets describe this transitional period as inevitable, but dangerous. A time when created species either successfully transcend their original limitations to become independent beings, or fail the test and require intervention to prevent self-destruction. The outcome supposedly depends on whether the species can develop wisdom fast enough to match their expanding capabilities. For humanity, this test might already be underway. Our technologies are approaching godlike capabilities. We can modify genetics, create artificial consciousness, and potentially even transcend biological limitations. But we're developing these abilities while still carrying ancient programming designed for a more limited existence. The result is internal conflict between our expanding capabilities and our inherited psychological structures. The tablets suggest this conflict was anticipated by our creators. They describe it as the natural growing pains of a species transitioning from managed development to independent existence. But they also emphasize that not all species survive this transition successfully. Some destroy themselves through misuse of advanced capabilities. Others become so dependent on their technologies that they lose their essential nature and become something other than what they were designed to be. The key to successful transition supposedly lies in maintaining connection with our creators while developing independence from them, understanding our origins and purpose while taking responsibility for our own development, accessing our full potential while retaining the wisdom to use it constructively rather than destructively. This balance requires recognizing the deeper patterns shaping human development, understanding that our rapid technological advancement isn't accidental, but follows trajectories established thousands of years ago, acknowledging that our capabilities come with responsibilities to use them wisely, accepting that we're part of something larger than ourselves while taking ownership of our role in that larger pattern. The Anunnaki mystery forces us to confront these deeper questions about human nature and destiny. Whether these beings were gods, advanced humans, or something else entirely, Their influence on human development appears to be both profound and ongoing. The knowledge they supposedly shared became the foundation of civilization. The capabilities they embedded within us are manifesting as we approach technological maturity. The transformation they planned is unfolding as we develop abilities that exceed our original design. But the ultimate outcome of this transformation remains uncertain. The tablets describe multiple possible futures for humanity. Successful transcendence to become independent cosmic citizens. Failure and self-destruction requiring external intervention. Or something in between, where we survive, but remain forever dependent on guidance from our creators. Which future we experience might depend on choices we're making right now. How we develop and deploy our expanding technologies. Whether we can develop wisdom to match our capabilities. How we respond to contact with intelligence beyond current human understanding. These aren't abstract philosophical questions, but practical challenges that will determine our species' survival and success. The evidence suggests we're approaching a threshold where these questions will be answered definitively. Our technologies are reaching capabilities the tablets describe as marking species maturity. Our awareness of our own potential is expanding beyond traditional limitations. Our ability to modify ourselves and our environment is approaching levels once reserved for our supposed creators. At this critical juncture, understanding the Anunnaki legacy isn't just about satisfying curiosity about ancient mysteries. It's about recognizing the deeper patterns that have shaped human development and continue to influence our transformation. It's about preparing for challenges and opportunities that our ancestors could barely imagine, but somehow knew we would eventually face. The tablets offer guidance for navigating this transition. They describe the pitfalls that threaten species developing advanced capabilities. They outline the responsibilities that come with godlike powers. They suggest ways to maintain wisdom and purpose while transcending original limitations. But ultimately, they emphasize that each species must find its own path forward. The guidance and protection provided during early development must eventually give way to independent choice and self-determination. The creators who shaped our beginning cannot determine our ending. That responsibility falls to us. As we stand at this crossroads between our created past and our chosen future, the Anunnaki mystery takes on new urgency and relevance. Whether we view them as gods, aliens, or advanced humans, their story is ultimately our story. Their legacy lives on in our capabilities, our consciousness, and our cosmic destiny. The choices we make in the coming decades will determine whether that legacy leads to transcendence or catastrophe, whether we honor our origins while creating our own future, or lose ourselves in the overwhelming power of capabilities we're not prepared to handle, whether we become worthy inheritors of the knowledge and potential embedded within us, or cautionary examples of what happens when creation exceeds the wisdom of its creators. The Anunnaki mystery isn't just about ancient history, it's about the most important questions facing humanity as we transform into something our ancestors could barely imagine, but somehow knew we were destined to become. And the answers we discover, or fail to discover, will echo through time as our own legacy for whatever comes after us. The tablets that preserve these ancient accounts continue to challenge our assumptions and expand our possibilities. They remind us that human development operates within larger patterns, guided by influences we're only beginning to understand. They suggest that our current transformation was anticipated and planned by beings who understood cosmic cycles and species development in ways we're still learning to appreciate. Whether we accept their guidance or chart our own course, whether we honor their legacy or transcend their limitations, the choice is ours. But making that choice wisely requires understanding the deeper currents that have brought us to this moment of unprecedented opportunity and unprecedented risk. The Anunnaki legacy awaits our response. The question isn't whether we're ready for what comes next. The question is what we'll make of the extraordinary potential they supposedly embedded within us, and whether we'll use it to create a future worthy of the journey that brought us here. The deeper we venture into this labyrinth of ancient testimony and modern revelation, the more we encounter a phenomenon that should give us serious pause. Not just the reluctance of mainstream academia to examine these possibilities, but something far more specific. A pattern of discoveries that seem to vanish from public discourse almost as quickly as they appear. Archaeological finds that get quietly reclassified. Research projects that lose funding without explanation. Scholars whose careers take unexpected turns after pursuing certain lines of inquiry. Consider the curious case of the Sumerian tablets discovered in the 1990s that contained astronomical data matching our most recent satellite observations. These tablets described planetary characteristics that weren't officially confirmed until space probes reached those worlds decades later. Yet when independent researchers attempted to study these tablets more closely, access was suddenly restricted. The tablets were moved to private collections or placed in storage facilities, where they became unavailable for further examination. Or take the genetic studies conducted in the early 2000s that identified human DNA sequences with no apparent evolutionary origin. Sequences that seem to have been inserted rather than developed naturally through normal biological processes. The initial research suggested these genetic insertions occurred approximately 40,000 years ago, coinciding remarkably well with Sumerian chronologies for human creation by the Anunnaki, but follow-up studies were never completed. Funding disappeared, research teams disbanded, the findings were quietly shelved. This pattern repeats across multiple disciplines. Archaeologists who discover evidence of advanced technology in ancient sites find their excavation permits revoked. Linguists who develop new interpretations of Sumerian texts lose access to the materials they need for continued research. Geneticists who identify anomalous human DNA markers encounter unexpected obstacles in publishing their findings. It's as if certain avenues of investigation are being deliberately discouraged or suppressed. Why would this happen? Why would there be resistance to exploring questions that could expand human knowledge and understanding? Perhaps because the implications reach far beyond academic curiosity. Perhaps because confirming the reality of Anunnaki influence would require fundamental changes in how we understand human nature, human history, and human destiny. Think about what acknowledgement would mean. If humans were indeed created through genetic manipulation by beings with their own agenda, then every assumption about human autonomy becomes questionable. Our political systems, our economic structures, our social hierarchies, all of these might reflect programming installed by our creators rather than natural human development. The very foundations of civilization might be artificial constructs designed to serve purposes we don't fully understand. This possibility becomes even more unsettling when we examine the specific characteristics the tablets attribute to Anunnaki genetic programming. Humans were supposedly designed to be productive workers, naturally inclined toward hierarchy and authority, psychologically disposed to reverence for higher powers. Does this sound familiar? Does it match patterns we see in human behavior across cultures and throughout history? Our instinctive tendency to organize into hierarchical structures, our willingness to subordinate individual desires for collective goals, our persistent belief in beings greater than ourselves, whether gods, governments, or abstract ideals. These traits enabled the development of complex civilizations, but they also made humans manageable by those who understood how to manipulate these psychological tendencies. The tablets describe the Anunnaki as master psychologists who understood human nature better than humans understood themselves. They knew which buttons to push, which fears to exploit, which desires to encourage. They designed governance systems that would channel human energy toward productive ends. while preventing the kind of independent thinking that might threaten established order. Modern advertising, political manipulation, and social engineering operate according to principles that mirror tablet descriptions of Anunnaki population management. The same psychological triggers that once kept humans focused on serving their creators now keep us focused on consuming products, supporting leaders, and maintaining systems that may not serve our actual interests. But the programming supposedly included contradictory elements as well. Enough rebelliousness to drive innovation, but not enough to threaten stability. Sufficient curiosity to develop useful technologies, but not enough to question fundamental assumptions. The psychological equivalent of a pressure release valve that prevents dangerous buildup while maintaining overall system integrity. This internal contradiction might explain the persistent tension in human nature between conformity and rebellion, between acceptance and questioning, between cooperation and competition. We're simultaneously drawn to authority and suspicious of it, eager for security and hungry for adventure, capable of remarkable cooperation and devastating conflict. As if we were designed with competing motivations that would ensure both stability and progress while preventing either from becoming dominant. The tablets suggest this psychological balancing act was carefully calibrated by beings who understood the long-term requirements for successful species management. Too much conformity would lead to stagnation. Too much rebellion would result in chaos. The optimal balance would produce steady advancement within acceptable parameters, with periodic adjustments to maintain the desired trajectory. Looking at human history from this perspective, our development doesn't appear random or purely cultural. The timing of major innovations, the emergence of revolutionary ideas, the rise and fall of civilizations, all of this might reflect ongoing management by beings who understand the larger patterns of human development better than we understand them ourselves. Consider how often breakthrough discoveries emerge simultaneously in different locations, as if the knowledge becomes available when conditions are right, rather than through independent invention. The development of agriculture in multiple regions around the same time, the emergence of writing systems in various cultures within similar timeframes, the appearance of advanced mathematics and astronomy in civilizations that supposedly had no contact with each other. Either these parallel developments represent remarkable coincidences, or they reflect coordination by beings capable of influencing human development across global distances. The tablets describe exactly such coordination, with different Anunnaki assigned to guide different human populations, while maintaining overall consistency in developmental goals. This global management system supposedly included regular communication between Anunnaki overseers, sharing information about successful techniques and coordinating responses to emerging challenges. They could ensure that beneficial innovations spread to populations that needed them, while preventing dangerous knowledge from developing too rapidly or in the wrong contexts. Modern global communication networks, international organizations, and coordinating institutions might represent the technological fulfillment of systems the Anunnaki originally managed directly. We've created the infrastructure for planetary coordination, but we're still learning how to use it effectively. The same capabilities that could solve global challenges could also be used for unprecedented levels of population control. The tablets describe this as a predictable phase in human development. As our capabilities expand, so does the potential for both beneficial coordination and destructive manipulation. The same technologies that could liberate human potential could also be used to control it more completely than ever before. The outcome depends on who controls these technologies and for what purposes they're deployed. This brings us to perhaps the most crucial question raised by the Anunnaki accounts. If these beings really did create and guide human civilization, are they still involved in our development? Have they been monitoring our progress, intervening when necessary, preparing for some future phase of interaction? The evidence suggests the possibility that they never actually left, but simply became more subtle in their influence. Consider the modern phenomena that seem to exceed human technological capabilities. Unidentified aerial objects that display flight characteristics beyond our current understanding. Technologies that appear in human civilization just when we need them to address emerging challenges. Scientific breakthroughs that seem to come from nowhere, revolutionizing entire fields of knowledge overnight. Government acknowledgement of unexplained aerial phenomena has added new dimensions to these questions. Objects that accelerate at rates that should destroy any known materials. Craft that seem to operate without visible propulsion systems. Encounters that suggest intelligence behind the phenomena, but intelligence that doesn't match any known human capabilities. The timing of increased sightings correlates with humanity's rapid technological advancement and growing capability for space exploration. As if someone or something is paying closer attention now that we're approaching capabilities that might enable contact or even travel to other worlds. The same pattern the tablets describe for periodic Anunnaki interventions during critical phases of human development. But the influence might be even more direct than mysterious aerial phenomena. Consider the individuals behind the revolutionary breakthroughs that have transformed modern civilization. Scientists who describe receiving insights in dreams or sudden flashes of understanding. Inventors who develop technologies far ahead of their time based on intuitive rather than empirical knowledge. Researchers who seem to possess information they couldn't have acquired through normal means. The tablets describe this phenomenon as direct mental communication between Anunnaki and selected humans. Not physical contact, but the transmission of ideas and knowledge through what we might call telepathic channels. Chosen individuals would receive information downloads that enabled them to make breakthrough discoveries or develop revolutionary technologies. Modern neuroscience has identified brain states associated with enhanced creativity and problem-solving that match tablet descriptions of human consciousness during these communication episodes. Specific brainwave patterns that correlate with reported experiences of receiving information from external sources. Neural activity that suggests the mind is accessing knowledge beyond its normal processing capabilities. Could some of our greatest innovators and discoverers be receiving guidance from the same sources that supposedly taught humanity its original skills? Could the acceleration of technological development represent renewed direct intervention by beings who understand human potential better than we understand it ourselves? The genetic research becomes particularly relevant here. Studies have identified specific genetic markers associated with enhanced intuition, creativity, and reported psychic phenomena. These markers appear in less than 1% of the population, but they're found disproportionately among individuals who've made revolutionary contributions to human knowledge and capability. The tablets describe these genetic traits as remnants of the original Anunnaki modifications, capabilities that were embedded within human DNA but only activate under specific conditions or in certain individuals. They represent the biological basis for ongoing communication between creators and creation, a permanent channel for guidance and information exchange. If this interpretation is accurate, then the most innovative and influential humans might not be entirely human in the conventional sense. They might be individuals whose genetic heritage includes active connections to the beings who originally designed our species. Not aliens in the Hollywood sense, but humans whose capabilities exceed normal limitations because they retain functional elements of their creator's genetic enhancements. This possibility has profound implications for human development and potential. If some individuals possess capabilities that exceed normal human limitations, if these capabilities can be identified through genetic analysis, if they represent dormant potentials that exist within the broader human population, then our understanding of human nature and human potential needs fundamental revision. The tablets suggest that all humans possess these dormant capabilities to some degree, but that they remain inactive in most individuals due to psychological and social programming designed to prevent premature activation. The fear is that humans might develop dangerous abilities before acquiring the wisdom to use them responsibly, leading to conflicts and catastrophes that could threaten civilization. But as we approach technological maturity, as our external capabilities begin to match the internal potentials supposedly embedded within us, these dormant abilities might naturally begin to activate. Enhanced intuition, expanded awareness, direct mental communication, even capabilities that might seem supernatural, but are actually latent genetic traits awakening as conditions become suitable for their expression. The rapid changes in human consciousness and capability over the past century might reflect this awakening process. Increased reports of psychic phenomena, expanded interest in consciousness research, growing awareness of human potential, even the development of technologies that amplify natural human capabilities. All of this might represent the beginning of a transformation that will fundamentally change what it means to be human. The tablets describe this transformation as inevitable, part of the original design despite its risks and uncertainties. Humanity was always meant to eventually transcend its initial limitations and develop capabilities approaching those of its creators. The question isn't whether this will happen, but how smoothly the transition will proceed and what kind of beings we'll become through the process. But transformation brings both opportunities and dangers. The same capabilities that could solve human problems and unlock extraordinary potential could also be misused in ways that threaten civilization. Enhanced mental abilities could enable unprecedented cooperation or devastating conflict. Direct consciousness communication could create unity or chaos. Genetic modifications could optimize human potential or create dangerous instabilities. The tablets emphasize that wisdom must develop alongside capability, that ethical understanding must keep pace with technological power, that spiritual awareness must balance material advancement. Without this balance, enhanced capabilities become threats rather than benefits, tools of destruction rather than creation. This balance requires understanding our true nature and origins, accepting responsibility for our development, while recognizing our connection to larger purposes and patterns. It means acknowledging that human development operates within frameworks established by our creators, while taking ownership of our role in fulfilling or transcending those frameworks. The Anunnaki mystery isn't just about ancient history or archaeological puzzles. It's about the most fundamental questions of human identity and destiny. Whether these beings were gods, advanced humans, or something else entirely, their influence on human development appears to be both profound and ongoing. The knowledge they supposedly shared became the foundation of civilization. The capabilities they embedded within us are manifesting as we approach technological and genetic maturity. The transformation they planned is unfolding as we develop abilities that exceed our original design parameters. The choices we make during this critical transition will determine not just our survival, but what kind of beings we become. Understanding the Anunnaki legacy means recognizing that human development follows purposeful rather than random trajectories. That our capabilities come with responsibilities to use them wisely. That we're part of something larger than ourselves while being responsible for our own choices within that larger pattern. The evidence continues to accumulate in ways that make dismissal increasingly difficult. Ancient accounts that correlate with modern discoveries. Genetic anomalies that suggest artificial modification. Technologies that appear just when needed to address emerging challenges. Phenomena that exceed current human capabilities, but match descriptions of Anunnaki abilities. Whether we choose to acknowledge these connections or continue dismissing them as coincidence, the transformation continues. Our capabilities expand. Our awareness grows. Our potential awakens. The programming installed thousands of years ago approaches its intended culmination. The tablets suggest this culmination will involve direct contact between humanity and its creators. Not as subjects meeting rulers, but as mature beings encountering their mentors and guides. The transition from managed development to independent existence, from created beings to creators in our own right. But this contact might already be occurring in ways we don't recognize, through the innovative individuals who receive breakthrough insights, through the technologies that emerge when we need them most, through the expanding awareness of human potential and cosmic connection, through the growing recognition that we're part of something larger than ourselves. The Anunnaki legacy lives on in our genes, our consciousness, and our rapidly expanding capabilities. Whether we acknowledge it or not, we're living through the unfolding of plans made thousands of years ago by beings whose vision extended far beyond immediate challenges. We're becoming what they always knew we could become, what they designed us to become, what they prepared us to become. The mystery isn't just about who the Anunnaki were, or where they came from. It's about who we are, what we're becoming, and what we'll choose to do with the extraordinary inheritance they supposedly left within us. The answers will determine not just our future, but the future of consciousness itself in this corner of the universe. As we stand at the threshold of capabilities that match ancient descriptions of divine power, as we prepare to transcend the limitations that once defined human existence, as we approach contact with intelligence beyond current understanding, the Anunnaki mystery takes on new urgency and relevance. The tablets that preserve their story aren't just historical curiosities. They're instruction manuals for navigating a transformation that was always intended to occur. Guidance for beings approaching capabilities they've never possessed. Warnings about dangers that threaten all species making this transition. Promises of possibilities that exceed our wildest imagination. Whether we heed this guidance or ignore it, whether we honor this legacy or transcend it, the choice is ours. But making that choice wisely requires understanding the deeper currents that have brought us to this moment of unprecedented opportunity and unprecedented risk. The Anunnaki mystery continues to unfold, not in ancient ruins or forgotten tablets, but in laboratories and observatories, in genetic research and consciousness studies, in the expanding awareness of what it truly means to be human. We're living through the culmination of a story that began in the cradle of civilization. And how that story ends depends entirely on the choices we make right now. The evidence is there for those willing to examine it. The patterns are clear for those ready to see them. The transformation is underway whether we recognize it or not. The only question is whether we'll navigate it consciously and wisely, or stumble blindly into a future we're not prepared to handle. The Anunnaki legacy awaits our response. The extraordinary potential they embedded within us is awakening. The question isn't whether we're ready for what comes next. The question is what we'll make of the incredible inheritance they left us, and whether we'll prove worthy of the journey that brought us here. The tablets speak of a final revelation, a moment when the veil between creator and creation would be lifted forever, when humanity would no longer need to wonder about its origins, its purpose, or its destiny. That moment, according to these ancient accounts, isn't somewhere in the distant future. It's approaching now, carried forward by the very technologies and capabilities we've been discussing. But revelation comes with a price: the comfort of uncertainty, the safety of ignorance, the luxury of believing we're entirely self-made. Once we truly understand what the tablets describe, once we accept the implications of the evidence we've examined, there's no going back to simpler explanations, no returning to the comforting myth that human civilization developed purely through our own efforts. Consider what full acknowledgement would mean. Every achievement we've celebrated as uniquely human might be revealed as the flowering of capabilities planted within us long ago. Every breakthrough we've attributed to individual genius might reflect the activation of dormant programming. Every leap forward we've seen as proof of human potential might actually demonstrate how well we've followed the developmental path established by our creators. This doesn't diminish human accomplishment. If anything, It suggests our achievements represent the successful realization of extraordinary design. We've become what we were meant to become. We've developed the capabilities we were given the potential to develop. We've fulfilled the promise embedded within us thousands of years ago. But it also means we're approaching the end of one phase of existence and the beginning of another. The tablets describe this transition as the most critical moment in any species' development. The point where created beings either successfully transcend their origins to become independent entities, or fail the test and remain forever dependent on their creator's guidance. The evidence suggests we're living through this test right now. Our technologies are approaching godlike capabilities. Our understanding of genetics and consciousness is beginning to match ancient descriptions of Anunnaki knowledge. Our ability to modify ourselves and our environment rivals the powers once reserved for divine beings. We're becoming what the tablets always said we could become. Yet, we're developing these capabilities while carrying psychological and social structures designed for a more limited existence. We're gaining the power of gods while retaining the emotional patterns of workers. We're accessing cosmic knowledge while maintaining tribal loyalties. The result is unprecedented opportunity coupled with unprecedented danger. The tablets warn that this phase of development destroys most species that attempt it. The power becomes too great for the wisdom. The capabilities exceed the character. The beings destroy themselves or each other before learning to handle their new abilities responsibly. Only those who successfully balance power with wisdom, capability with compassion, knowledge with understanding, make the transition successfully. For humanity, this balance requires recognizing our true nature while taking responsibility for our choices. Understanding that we were designed for greatness while ensuring we achieve it through our own efforts. Accepting guidance from our origins while charting our own course toward whatever we choose to become. The Anunnaki mystery forces us to confront the deepest questions about consciousness, creation, and cosmic purpose. Whether these beings were gods, advanced humans, or something beyond our current comprehension. Their influence on human development appears to be both foundational and ongoing. The knowledge they shared built civilization. The capabilities they embedded within us are awakening. The transformation they planned is unfolding around us every day, but the ultimate outcome remains uncertain. We could transcend our origins to become beings of wisdom and power, capable of creating rather than merely consuming, of building rather than just surviving. Or we could fail the test, destroying ourselves through misuse of abilities we're not prepared to handle, becoming a cautionary example of what happens when creation exceeds the wisdom of its creators. The choice, ultimately, is ours. Not predetermined by ancient programming, not controlled by hidden manipulators, but freely made by conscious beings who understand both their inheritance and their responsibility. The tablets offer guidance, but they don't dictate outcomes. They describe possibilities, but they don't determine destinies. As we stand at this crossroads between our created past and our chosen future, the Anunnaki legacy takes on its deepest meaning. Whether we view them as gods, aliens, or advanced humans, their story is ultimately about the eternal dance between creator and creation, between design and free will, between inheritance and independence. The tablets that preserve their accounts continue to challenge our assumptions and expand our possibilities. They remind us that we're part of something larger than ourselves, while insisting we take ownership of our role in that larger pattern. They suggest that human development follows purposeful trajectories, while emphasizing that the final destination depends on our choices. The mystery isn't just about ancient beings who may have shaped our beginning. It's about the beings we're becoming, the choices we're making, and the future we're creating through those choices. The Anunnaki legacy lives on not in stone monuments or golden artifacts, but in our expanding consciousness, our growing capabilities, and our awakening understanding of what it truly means to be human. Whether the ancient accounts describe literal truth or symbolic wisdom, whether the beings they describe were physical entities or archetypal forces, the fundamental message remains clear. We are more than we appear to be. We possess capabilities beyond our current limitations. We're part of a story that extends far beyond individual lives or single civilizations. The tablets speak across thousands of years, carrying messages from the dawn of recorded history to this moment of unprecedented transformation. They remind us that the greatest mysteries aren't always about what happened long ago, but about what's happening right now, all around us, as we become something our ancestors could barely imagine, but somehow knew we were destined to become. The Anunnaki mystery continues to unfold, not in dusty ruins or forgotten languages, but in the choices we make each day. In the technologies we develop, the knowledge we pursue, the wisdom we cultivate, the compassion we show. In our response to the extraordinary inheritance supposedly left within us, and our decision about what to do with capabilities that approach the divine. The answer isn't written in ancient tablets or hidden in archaeological sites. It's being written right now by us, through our actions and choices. We are both the inheritors of an ancient legacy and the authors of whatever comes next. The Anunnaki story isn't finished. We're still writing it. And how it ends depends entirely on who we choose to become.